Welcome to our third episode of Rucode's Office Hours here with our special guest, Paige Bailey from Google.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. And for folks that I might not have met before, I am part of our Google DeepMind team. So I work on our Gemini APIs, AI Studio, Gemma, our open model family, as well as things like JAX. So basically, all of the research that we get out into the world via DeepMind, I get to work with all of the engineers and researchers who make that happen.
That's awesome. So our typical format here is um, do some we do questions from the crowd, from our community. This is a treat for them. So
Amazing, and I see, this is my first Discord, office hour session, which is pretty magical. I love all of the features that have been added around it, and it also looks like there's the ability to share a screen, so if folks want to see something in the way of demos, I'm also happy to do demos, if that will help answer questions.
yeah, absolutely, that would be wonderful. I
Amazing.
I, I typically share my screen, but I think today we're going to keep it to focus on Google. So community, what do we have for questions? Remunity. They're going to start rolling in here. I guess you can probably start with telling us a little bit about yourself and your history. How long have you been with Google? Um, yeah.
Yeah. So I started doing machine learning around 2009, so back before it was so interesting, or at least so like prevalent in the zeitgeist, perhaps. And so it's been really really interesting to see it evolve since then. My background is geophysics and applied math, and then I did CS for grad school, and started kind of doing work in the oil and gas industry at Chevron. Was contributing to open source tools and libraries around the 2009 2010 timeframe. So, kind of the traditional data science stack that folks from the early days of machine learning might have familiarity with. Have always really loved dev tools and joined Google around 2017, 2018, first in Google Brain, so working on machine learning frameworks. Spent a year away during the pandemic at GitHub, so was helping with machine learning features in VS Code, as well as things like code spaces. Got to be one of the early kind of UX testers for the Copilot extension, and then came back to Google just a few years ago to work on models as well as AI as applied to software development. So lots of kind of similar themes throughout my history, but mostly
Yeah.
machine learning, AI, dev tools.
Wow. Cool. Well, I guess we have our first question. Does Google take agents and agent capabilities into account when training newer models?
Yeah, so we are that's an excellent question. We are definitely incorporating things like things like tools use and function calling into our pre-training and post-training data when training our Gemini model family. We've also added a couple of capabilities in our Gemini models. Like if I zoom over to AI Studio really quickly, hopefully folks can see my screen. I'll make it a little bit bigger. This is AI Studio or AI.dev, which is kind of the best place to interact with the new Gemini models as soon as they come out. You can see here off to the right the different model names.
Still
You can
loading in,
generate, oh,
I think.
sorry.
I don't know. It says streaming failed to start. Well, I guess that's Discord. Never
Gotcha.
had that happen before.
No worries. So if folks are curious about the Gemini models and their capabilities, AI.dev is a good place to go to get started. The Gemini APIs have the ability to do things like tools use and function calling, but you can also kind of mix and match the Gemini models with, MCP servers or any of the other things that really enable agent tasks. We also have Gemini integrations with Crew AI as well as LangGraph, LangChain, like all of the usual suspects, Agent Ops. So strongly recommend taking a look at those as well.
Okay. Is Gemini 2.5 Pro better at using tools with the native API, or train is it trained to use tools in a more general way?
Gotcha. So I'm not sure I understand the question. I do know that we incorporated And Girdle Escher Spock, which is a brilliant name for a handle. We're hearing a little bit of background noise. Um, so I'm going to go ahead and mute just so that we don't hear the background noise. With the Gemini 2.5 Pro, you can definitely use tools, and you can use function calling, both as kind of baked into the API. So that thing that I was mentioning before around turning on tools use and function calling within the API. But also the model is natively much better at it than Gemini 2.0 Flash and the predecessors might have been. So I don't know if that's answering your question. I can also give specific examples, so things like tutorials that might be helpful, including a function calling tutorial, if
Yeah.
folks want to see.
Okay. Okay. Google has a different reasoning, or a different approach to reasoning than other companies like Anthropic, and the reasoning isn't a separate part of the output response. Can you explain a bit about your approach to reasoning and the difference?
Yeah, so can you see my screen now, or is it able to be shared or shown?
Still spinning. I'm not seeing it on either one of my computers.
Gotcha. I can see it, which is a little bit strange to me. I can see it on mine. It does say that so it looks like there are some people who say that it's still loading, and then others say it works for them or they can see it. Um,
Hmm. Are you able
Interesting.
to share just a window?
Well, it's just the Chrome tab that I'm sharing.
Yeah. Oh,
So it should not be resource intensive.
no.
Um, Interesting. But for folks who might not have seen some of the, this is going to make it hard
I'm
to not
sorry.
be able to. Yep. Let me try. I'm going to take the Chrome tab and put it into its own dedicated window, and then we'll see if I can just share a window, and maybe that will make it a little bit easier.
Good idea.
Yeah. Does that help?
Yes, we've got it. I see something.
Oh, amazing. This will make the Q&A session a lot more interesting. I promise, like demos are much more fun than me just talking. And I usually feel like demos are a much better way to express concepts. So this is AI Studio. You can kind of mix and match and select different models within AI Studio to use within your projects. And as folks were mentioning, with the new kind of thinking mode and the thinking budget that we've introduced for the Gemini 2.5 Flash model, you can do really interesting things. So if I turn on thinking mode for Gemini 2.5 Flash, and then perhaps I turn on something like code execution, you can do something like say, please create a cluster plot using the iris dataset from scikit-learn. Also make sure to include basic stats about the dataset, and then hit run. You can see this thinking box that gets displayed up towards the top, and if you expand it out, you can see the plan that gets included. So it's loading the data set, it's performing clustering, visualizing the clusters, etc. And can incorporate that into its code generation process, as well as the executable code for generating thoughts. If you turn off thinking mode, you can kind of rerun the query and see just the code get output. Or you can kind of set and customize the thinking budget to make, Gemini think quite a lot or think very
It's
little.
I think some people are
For
still having trouble seeing it. Sorry.
no worries. Like I'm just gonna
Hi.
keep going.
Okay,
Like
perfect.
I'm
Yeah,
yeah, I'm just gonna keep going. And
good
I
call.
apologize for anybody who is having trouble kind of seeing the shared screen. We'll happily like record a video or something afterwards so that folks can get a little bit more insight into what's happening. But the nice thing is that when you click this little Get Code button, You get everything that you would need in order to replicate the experiment that you were just trying within the UI itself. And you can also see kind of the tools that you incorporated. Here is a little one-liner, so we added code execution. But crucially, you can also see this thinking config with a thinking budget displayed as well. So if you reduce the thinking budget, then you get responses much faster. If you increase the thinking budget, your responses and your outputs might be a little bit more kind of reliable or verbose, because Gemini's had a little bit more time to think about it, pun intended. But you also are incorporating more tokens into your input and into your analysis.
Yeah. Okay. We've got some more questions here. Let's see. What diff format is Gemini 2.5 Pro better at? I've seen some benchmarks where it performs much better with fenced diffs.
Yep. So the diff format for the latest Gemini models, and I believe there was a visualization for it on one of the AIDR kind of comparisons between models just recently. The Gemini does have kind of like the diff fenced format. But let me see if I can find the leaderboard comparing the different styles for. Yep, here we go. So I'm going to try again to share a screen. We'll see if it works. So I'm going to stop and then share again, and we'll try the AIDR. You can see kind of the Gemini experimental versions that are already added, but you can also kind of see the edit formats for each one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
And it has changed. So some of the models are a little bit more diff friendly, and then others are kind of the whole style edit. But I would encourage you to take a look at them within the AIDR code editing leaderboard and the polyglot leaderboard to see the diff formats.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. No. Absolutely. That's AIDR's polyglot is.
Yep. And I'll add a link just in case folks were having struggles seeing this. Is there a chat option within the? Oh, I see a chat. There we go. The AIDR LLM leaderboards. Also, Discord is quickly becoming my favorite live streaming platform. Oh no.
I don't see Haynes moving right now.
I spoke too soon.
Yes. Looks at a
Also,
question.
yeah.
In our extension, we don't use the native function calling for Gemini models. We make the model output XML structure to run our tools. Do you think that Gemini models, especially 2.5 Pro, are better at using the native function calling?
So I will say that that I have heard from some folks that the XML tagging is a little bit more reliable for tools use. So just if folks want to try that out, I would be really curious to see if you've created benchmarks or evals to showing different performance between using native function calling versus this XML tagging style and approach. I also I also sort of am basing this on, Klein uses the XML tag style approach for defining tools. So that seems to be a little bit more reliable than some of the other models that they've been experimenting with. I think that the function calling with structured outputs. So if you use Gemini to create kind of a structured JSON output as a format, and then use function calling with some of those outputs, it should be reliable. If it's not, then that's a bug. And please feel free to reach out and let us know, and we can try to understand what might be going wrong. But I love all the questions about function calling.
Yeah.
It's just that it's a little bit of a challenge to kind of show it in action without having the ability to pull up VS Code and start sharing. I will add a link to our function calling tutorial though for native function calling, which might
Awesome.
be interesting.
Okay. What advice would you give to a student trying to get into the industry?
Oh, wow. So there's never been a better time to build things, certainly. I think there's a question now as to whether folks need to go to university or need to like have any sort of post high school education in order to actually enter into the tech industry, and build applications in a way that is kind of robust and that they can build a business around. I think I saw something just recently showing that there were people who entered into Stanford and then 2 days later they were dropping out to build a company, which I don't know if I would recommend necessarily, but it is definitely a new way of life than what we saw 10 years ago. I think the best advice that I could give to anyone is now it's so easy to build. All you have to do is download something like VS Code, which is free and open source, and Ru Code, which is free and open source, and plug in an API key from a model which has, if you're using Gemini 2.5 Pro or Flash, there's a very generous free tier. So for $0, your only limits are your own creativity, right? Like you can ask for many
Yeah.
different things to be built. You can, create things that are joyful and useful to you, and to your friends. I don't think there's really a need to kind of enter into university unless you're still trying to figure out what you want to do. If you do have passion around building and deploying web applications or things like VS Code extensions.
Yeah. What is the future vision in Google for AI models? Is it more of a developer or consumer-oriented approach?
Great question. So I think we have a variety of model tiers at Google. So our Pro family, which is kind of the largest models, Flash and Flash Lite, which we see most commonly used in production, including in our Google products. And then also Gemini Nano, which is small enough that you can fit it on a mobile device, which we have. We've put it in Pixel devices, as well as embedding within our Chrome browsers. So you can embed, this tiny model on the order of 1 billion or 4 billion parameters in size in a way that it's sandboxed and it's just working within a browser tab. So we find that, having kind of this scaled approach to choosing a model that's right-sized for a task is a great way to bring down costs, but also to help with things like latency. With if people don't necessarily have access to robust Wi-Fi connections, making sure that they have models that are on board to be able to answer those questions. And then we're translating all of that back into the developer APIs that we make available for people to use the Gemini models, or if they want to use Gemma, we have a whole bunch of open model checkpoints that people can download and incorporate into their apps or fine tune for their own purposes. So I think it's a balance of both. We're benefited at Google in the sense that we have, the Docs team and the Sheets team, YouTube, Waymo, all of our teams that are building like the Gemini app, AI Studio, etc. That are very much benefiting from our fast and our kind of very cheap to use Gemini models. But we're also hoping to have this platform where developers can use the APIs, can build on them for their own companies. And that's also the best way to build models, right? Is like the only way that you can know what kind of pre-training and post-training data that you should be putting into the models is by seeing what people are trying to build with them. And
Ah,
so we do know kind of based on all of the kind of end user facing products that we have at Google, some of the ways in which people want to use models. But the only way to kind of get a broader perspective is by opening up the API and letting people build.
yeah, makes sense. Okay. Um, can you make Gemma good at tool calling? Okay.
So
Let's see
so
what.
I will say the Gemma model, the Gemma 3 model family, which was just recently released. I'm going to add a link to that as well. The Gemma 3 team, in addition to releasing the models themselves, they also just recently released, I think it's just a couple of days ago, they released some quantized checkpoints. So I've been running like the Gemma 12B on my laptop most recently because you can run it in LM Studio and it's relatively fast, but also quite fun. If you did want to make Gemma really great at tool calling and function calling, you could certainly fine tune an instance for that task
Yeah.
specifically, but the Gemma 3 model team are also like investing significantly in trying to get more of that kind of data into the Gemma 3 models. So stay tuned, but also, the world is your oyster, and I guarantee you that if you create a function calling fine-tuned Gemma version, that people would use it and would probably get a lot of attention.
Okay. I didn't expect you to actually answer that question.
Oh,
Thank you
sorry.
very
Oh,
much.
no worries.
No. Let me see. What do you think about vibe coding in non-developers?
Oh gosh. So vibe coding. Like I think that that is a really interesting term um or something that is a really enchanting idea. So it's basically reducing the cycle time between having an idea and actually implementing it.
Yeah.
You have an idea and you're able to almost see it realized in in just a few seconds. And that's magical. That is taking rapid prototyping to an entirely new level, right?
Oh,
And
totally.
so yeah, and so I love this idea that every information worker or every person who has an idea for an app is able to kind of imagine it into being just by kind of typing in what they would like to see. Um, I do think that longer term, we're going to have some struggles. We're already seeing this, right? Like with people accidentally exposing their API keys, or not necessarily knowing what kind of security to kind of use for their application, or not knowing, as an example, like if they build an app and they're using something like IndexedDB for the data storage component, they don't necessarily know that it's persistent data storage, and so they won't know how to add like a more robust backend. But I think that longer term, it's we're going to need to build these kinds of safety checks and quality checks around applications so that people who are able to finally build things perhaps for the first time won't be accidentally exposing themselves to some level of risk.
Yeah.
So the software engineers who have experience and expertise deploying things in a reliable and scalable and secure way, I think they need to be building tooling such that everybody else who's just beginning to build doesn't end up running into challenges that they might not be able to see themselves.
Yeah. Okay. Here we have a question from one of our contributors. He's gonna. There we go. His mic's
Hi,
on.
this is Sharik. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you, Sharik?
I'm good. Okay, so this is a question combined with me and Lex. Do you guys have any plans in the pipeline for coding models? I mean, current models, they do perform good with coding, I'm not gonna lie, but is there any plan for specific coding related models?
Yeah, so our first iteration, and I guess is kind of a background. I was on the Palm 2 Gemini and Gemma papers, the original ones. And the original Gemma had a fine-tuned variant called Code Gemma. So we were kind of investing in creating these code fine-tuned models, as well as kind of models that are kind of FIM tuned, so like they could do fill in the middle sort of things for better code completion. I am not allowed to talk about any models that we might have in the pipeline that we have not yet announced. But I will say that for the Gemma models in particular, people have found a lot of value in doing continued pre-training or fine-tuning to make them excellent at software development use cases. So things like CodeGen or just being a little bit more reliable at generating specific types of applications. So today, there's a lot of stuff going around about how all of the large language model APIs just out of the box, they're really, really good at generating, I believe it's Beat applications or something similar. And then if you want it to be able to reliably generate other kinds of web applications, so something that is like more Next.js specific or another framework, then you might need to fine tune it to be excellent at producing that kind of code. I think that there's still a lot of room for either fine-tuning open models to be really great at those specific tasks, or even just incorporating those kinds of examples into the context window and saying something like, "Hey, Gemini, here are 2 examples of the kinds of apps that I'm trying to build. Now please generate an app that does this particular task." So if you
Thank
are
you.
yeah, if you are generating code or wanting to generate whole apps, like, don't underestimate the value of just putting things into the context window and showing the model examples.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Great. Okay, I guess Daniel said again, 10th question. What plans does Google have with the newly introduced A2A protocol? Would you say this protocol is useful specifically for coding tasks?
I will also add a link to the A2A protocol. For folks who might not have heard about it before, it's an agents to agents protocol. So it's not intended to replace MCP servers. It's mostly intended to be a way for agents to share data in a consistent format between one another. This is not being driven by the Google DeepMind teams. It's being driven by our colleagues over in the Google Cloud side of the world. So I think that some of the things that we were discussing before around like secure transactions between agents, especially for things like payments, the A2A protocol might be something worth taking a look at. But given that the sort of transmission format is probably going to be some sort of code or structured data outputs until the agents decide that they can lower it down to just bytecode as a communication mechanism between agents. I think that's something to take a look at.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think we have Sasha here. He's a relatively new contributor, but also our newest member of the RuCode team.
Oh, cool.
Hello, hello. Yeah, I just kind of started jumping into meetings today, actually. Everyone can
Awesome.
hear me today?
Yep.
Okay, great. My question was going to be kind of a shameless request, but I think this is something a lot of people would like to hear more of. Could we get better hard budgeting mechanisms for users? I've heard a few hobbyists going over budget, like hundreds of dollars because they're not tracking their tokens well enough. They'd really like to set monthly amounts or, just have some sort of other way. I think Vertex only allows you to set like soft budgeting for your usage, and I think you can set up some like cloud functions or something to stop that. But it's kind of like Yeah, people are going over budget, like hundreds of dollars now because they can't track closely enough.
Yeah, that is something that I can take back to the Vertex team. Again, that's a kind of a different part of Google. There
Yeah.
are colleagues over in the Google Cloud side of the world. But I agree with you. It would be awesome to kind of create hard limits for the Gemini APIs and for the things that people are running on Google Cloud infrastructure.
Yeah, especially because there's so many students right now that are just like trying to get by with like free allocations. I've heard it being problems for a few people. Okay, thank you for answering the question.
Absolutely. And there is a really generous free tier for the Gemini APIs that you can generate via AI Studio. Let me add a link to the pricing for those. So often whenever people are working on hackathons or on personal projects, what I recommend is if you're generating API keys through AI Studio, like don't attach a credit card just so there's no surprises. And then if you do need to add a little bit more, just be mindful. There's a way to kind of take a look at the API budgets within AI Studio as well. Let me see if I can go ahead and share, or at least for my personal account. But you can see kind of the usage data. Share. So this is just kind of one of my personal accounts, but you can see if you click set up billing or view usage data, you can kind of click and then see how the APIs are being used over time. Though I don't think that there's a way to flag system limits necessarily.
Ah, yes. Okay, I have another question here for you. It is, have you used Rue Code? And what do
Oh
you
yeah.
know about it?
Definitely. I use root code every day. Though I will say like my VS Code is a little bit of a disaster at the moment, in that I think I have root code installed, Klein continue.dev, the Gemini Code Assistant extension, and a couple of others, just
Yeah,
to mix and match between the two. I will say I use root code most frequently.
yeah,
And I love the features that y'all have added around kind of being able to monitor the cost for each kind of component query as you kind of build a plan and kind of recode cycles through each step of the process. I think that's awesome. Also really like that you can set two different models. So one for kind of like the harder reasoning and planning, and then one that might be a little bit more lightweight for doing kind of the uh, the kind of more rote boilerplate tasks. But I really, really like Rue Code and really like what y'all are building.
the boomerang tasks, I think, the task orchestration is what.
Yeah.
Yes, that differentiates us from most of the other players in our field right now. The way that we can send out and come back with a summary instead of simply just squishing down the context repeatedly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I also quite like it the ability to ask follow-up questions. So as an example, if you give a high-level task for building a web application or something similar to Rue code, um, I, it frequently comes back with questions that can help you clarify what architecture you would like to have for the web application, or what kind of framework you might want to select.
Yeah.
So those are all very cool. And I love that I've only been using it with the Gemini 2.5 Flash and Pro models. So if there are, I haven't tried it with other models, but with Gemini 2.5 Pro and Flash, it's doing really, really well.
Yes, it is Gemini 2.5 Pro is by far my favorite model. The only thing that I ran into was without the caching support until now. It was getting a little costly, and also sometimes it can be frustrating. And I guess it's only a preview or an experimental model. It can be a little inconsistent. We send in our system prompt instructions on how to use the tools, and it gets it. And then another boomerang task opens up and it goes, okay, got this. And it sends back everything, but in JSON instead of XML. And, sort of going, okay. I found the best workaround was to just end that boomerang task and re-trigger it. But that inconsistency has sometimes baffled us a little bit, and we're working hard to improve our apply diff tool to sort of uh, take those soft failures and turn them around to get the right output we need, or even convert them into working output.
Yep.
Given your experience in the space, what would you prioritize for us adding to root code?
Oh,
That's a good one.
really wonderful question. So I think something, we were just discussing vibe coding and like some of the challenges that people experience while they're building these applications and attempting to deploy them. I think there should be like certainly a cleaner path to deployment from, working in an IDE towards pushing something out with a URL that other folks can access. So even if it's just kind of like E2B, the e2b.fragments.dev has the ability to push any generated application to a unique URL. I think it's ephemeral, so it's only stored for a little bit. But like even just giving people the ability to kind of share the work that they've just done with their friends for static websites, I think would be rad. Another thing that would be really, really useful is a little bit more tooling around explaining the code base that you're working in. So especially folks that are coming online to legacy code bases or like code bases, I'm sure everybody on the call has probably experienced this where you land in GitHub, the project worked 6 months ago, but the world has changed dramatically in 6 months. And
Yes.
so just kind of like helping people understand what's broken and what's not, and then how to get everything kind of updated and fixed with the correct dependencies to actually run in a stable way, I think would be really nifty. And it's something that things like boomerang mode and kind of the tooling that root code is built would be particularly helpful for. So code base explaining, kind of these maintenance tasks around getting, code bases that might be a little bit more stale up to a place where they can be useful and deployed. And then also like having a cleaner path towards, you build something and it's really exciting and you want to show your friends, making it, deployed or deployable as opposed to just works on my machine. Those are the three things that I would consider investing in.
Thank you. No, great answers. I'm more than confident that our dev team is going to, if they're not already listening right now, that they will be taking those and considering them strongly. Another question here. What is Gemini's team engagement with the science and research community? It seems like OpenAI are rapidly focusing up the stack on hardcore research and development applications. Wonder if Gemini has the same ambitions.
So we definitely partner very deeply with the science and the academic community at Google DeepMind. I'm not sure if folks saw recently, but we announced a project called our DeepMind Co-Scientist, which is a multi-agent system that helps accelerate scientific breakthroughs. Demis Hassabis and John Jumper, the two creators of AlphaFold at Google DeepMind, they also just recently won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for kind of help with accelerating some of the things around drug discovery. We have deep university and academic partnerships as well. So everything from academic grants, especially for our Gemma models, to even just kind of co-designing some of these solutions and features with folks that are professors at universities or even just grad students that are trying to get their work out into the world. So I do feel like we're very lucky at Google in the sense that we have a lot of research happening internally. Everything from like self-driving cars to fusion science and fusion research to like designing quantum computers. But we also have these strong external partnerships as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Good answer. Another one. Do you think coding agents will reach the point where the only limit is creativity, or will coding capabilities always be needed?
I think, basically everything that uh, and perhaps I'm the wrong person to ask this question to. We've seen kind of progressively over the last several decades, moving from punch cards, and kind of like the plug-in systems for wiring programs to moving more towards like COBOL and BASIC, and then C, and then C++, and then Python, and each layer is kind of like an additional higher level layer of abstraction on top of the thing that's actually what we're all trying to do, which is solve problems and build things, and to try to get ideas out into the world. And so I feel like the thing that is most important is having really great intuition around what to build, what problems need to be solved, how to solve them, methodology for solving them, and then the kind of tools that are required to get to that end. They're going to constantly be evolving over time. So there's with power tools, it didn't get any less meaningful to know how to like screwdriver in a screw, but it sure did get faster, right? And so I think that knowing how to program will not be a net harm, but
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be like a hindrance for folks who don't know how to program in the way that has historically been, kind of like the enterprise software development style of programming. I don't think that that folks will have to learn how to do that in order to deploy software applications in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is exciting. Like it's, I feel like I mention this all the time, but like I had always wanted, my first programs were, when I was 8 and 9 years old on a little Apple II, writing text adventure games, and I had always
Yeah.
wanted to build like a 2D platformer or a 3D game, and thought I would never be able to because I just didn't have those capabilities.
Yeah.
And with the introduction of these large language model based tools, like I've been creating like new 2D platformers every single day. Like I've got a cron job that
Right.
runs it, and it just like creates something that's personalized and enjoyable, that I can test out with my morning coffee.
Yeah.
And that's magical. Like that is really exciting to see.
Here, this is Matt. He is our lead dev.
Greetings.
Yeah, good to meet you. I talked to you a little bit on Twitter, unless it's not funny, in which case it's Hannes running the Twitter there.
Yeah, no, that was him, I
But
swear.
yeah, but
Awesome.
thanks for taking the time. I wanted to jump in to ask you a question about the last thing you said. I'm really curious how you think teams are going to look like, what teams are going to look like at enterprises going forward as AI gets more prevalent and people get better at using it. Do you think the roles are going to be the same, or do you think it's going to look drastically different?
I I believe it will. There's no way to kind of continue having things look the same, right? Like and there's we've already seen really impressive stats around super super small, highly focused teams having outsized impact based on these AI enabled tools that they've been able to incorporate into their software development work. I'm sure everybody on the call saw that Codium with Windsurf is now staring at a potential $3 billion acquisition after less than 4 years, and like a very small number of devs that are able to do outsized impact style things. So I think for enterprise companies, they're going to need to kind of reevaluate some of the work that can now perhaps be automated away. And then that frees up people to do much more interesting things. Like at Google, we Sundar mentioned this on one of our earnings calls just recently. Back then, which was before we introduced our latest models, 25% of the code checked in every single week is generated by AI at Google. It's only grown since then. So the percentage has only increased since Sundar mentioned that 25%. And that doesn't mean that we've, sort of stopped doing as much. If anything, we've only scaled out the number of things that we can do as a company because we've seen this acceleration, and people are now it's much easier to build and also to maintain systems than it was previously, and much more delightful. Like I would love to never have to worry about migrating software from one version to another. Or I would love to have kind of like self-healing documentation such that every time you update a code base, like all references to a specific function get updated as well. Like that is, music to a developer's ears, is that you can just focus on building and then something else takes over the process of maintenance.
Yeah, I was going to ask how things have changed. I assume that it's not just the AI writing a higher percentage of the code, but that actually more code is getting written as well, right? Has the team been able to keep up with that in terms of documentation and code review and even product development and design? Or has that part changed as well?
So we use AI for code review, as well as for help with migrations, as well as for tasks like, if SREs, if you experience an OMG or something like a service disruption, like being able to synthesize all of the information for that as well. I'm going to try again. Like let's take a look. But we have a Gemini baked into our pull request hub for at least some of our repos. And so if you look at one of these, so I'm going to pull up the pull request. You can see, let me check. Maybe Gemini wasn't triggered for this one. There we go. So the Code Assist bot gives a summary of changes, highlights the change logs, and then also gives insight into merge readiness, as well as the summary of findings, and sometimes even makes recommended changes to the code. So if you're a maintainer, you don't have to do all of the work of kind of setting up the Gemini, setting up the code review process yourself. You can just kind of, there's an example of Gemini recommending a code change. So
I
saying
like that.
like using eval tests can be risky. So here's an alternative. And so these kinds of things are much like they're appreciated from at least my personal perspective. Just because, reviewing a PR requires getting a whole bunch of mental state in order, like, trying to understand the changes that somebody's proposing. If they're trying to make a lot of changes all at once, like asking them to decompose that into a series of PRs instead of just one big one. But having a model kind of handle all of that for you, such that when you do arrive at the PR to give the final stamp of approval, like all of that has been kind of fully documented, all of the questions have been answered, and it's much easier to maintain. Especially open source libraries, like open source projects are, chaotic in all of the
Yes.
best ways. Like, but having something that feels like a helpful little assistant to bring order to the chaos is quite nice.
The person who's in charge of our reviews is actually Matt, and
Oh, cool.
you're speaking his language right now.
Excellent.
I say, yeah, chaos is going up and to the right. I'll say any kind of AI review help is much appreciated.
I also feel like it's helpful for kind of celebrating open source contributions as well. Like it's there was a project that I worked on a while back that every time a new contributor made a PR that was successfully merged, there would be some sort of like celebration of it on their Twitter or like whatever it is. like on Discord. And so just kind of thanking people for their contribution and saying why it's important, as well as help with kind of personalizing the kind of the changelog whenever you push new versions. I think that would all be like really, really cool to see.
Yeah. I guess we got another one from Daniel. This is a
Cool.
good one. Do you have any questions for the Rue Code community? I've frozen again. Or you're frozen.
It's not you.
Oh, well.
Yeah, Paige is frozen.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, that was a hell of a question.
damn. Okay. I
I
guess
ran away too.
Matt's going to have to answer a question then.
You didn't tell me this is part of the deal. All right.
Oh no. So
You're back.
I'm not sure I heard the last question. Like,
Do you have any questions for the Rue Code community?
oh, amazing. So one question is for folks who are using Gemini 2.5 Pro or 2.5 Flash and have experimented with it using Rue Code, how can we make that better for y'all in terms of documentation, tutorials, just walkthroughs of how to effectively use Gemini within the context of Rue Code. And another question would be, what are gaps that you see today that impact, your ability to ship, like your ship velocity, that we can try to focus on closing. So first question, very self-serving, for
Yeah.
people who have used Gemini, like tell us how to make it better. And then the second question, like what are the gaps between like having something working within your IDE towards getting it out into the world?
I see one. Rugal search would be helpful. No, just a play. We have our own Rue dictionary, so we might have to add that one. Let's see things coming at the screen here. Cost. Oh, that one's a little harder. Hey, Daniel actually showed up. He's the one who asked the question.
Cool.
Hello.
Greetings.
Yeah, for the first question, I think it was where do we find more obstacles with Gemini in general? I think one thing I've seen a lot, I guess two things. One is the diff editing that I asked about earlier. Sometimes Gemini has problems with that. And since a lot of people was using the model, see a lot of that. And the second thing would be how easy it is to use Vertex AI. A lot of people is very confused about how to set that up and actually use the Gemini models.
I strongly recommend if you're just wanting to generate API keys, do that through AI Studio. So the aistudio.google.com or ai.dev. And you don't have to worry about kind of navigating Vertex AI or the Cloud Console in order to just generate API keys there. I've also created kind of like a hackathon guide for the newer models and some of the features. So this might be helpful for folks to take a look at. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, like the diff formatting, and then also, it can be challenging. Vertex AI is really intended for enterprise customers. And so like it's challenging to try to adopt enterprise solutions as kind of like a smaller dev team. And so I would recommend against going that route unless you absolutely have to at the very beginning.
Okay. Anybody else have an answer? I did not write down the answers to your questions. I recorded them though.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
I think caching is huge, right? That came out like yesterday or something, and we're working on getting it integrated today. I think that especially what we've seen is that with the amazing, million token context window, the way that our app works, where it sends the entire history every time, just ends up getting really expensive as you get
Yeah.
near the end of the context window. So, just speaking for the feedback I've gotten, I think people are very excited for that. Um, and
Yeah.
yeah, I think the diff editing stuff, that's one question I had actually, is it seems like all the models are a little bit different when it comes to diff editing. And if I'm being 100% honest, I think the code we have is more optimized for Sonnet just because it's been a great model for so long. But I am curious if there's a way for us to better work more closely with the Google team on understanding kind of the differences between the models or other best practices. I mean, I'm like writing code to like convert escaped ampersands into unescaped ampersands, things like that. That I just feel like when I mess that up or someone messes that up, it can kind of cause problems for our users in a way that maybe you all already know about. So if there's any way for us to work together more closely, like the
Yeah.
root community in Google, like I would love that.
Yeah, we can definitely get you added to the Trusted Testers program, so you get kind of pre-warning of models before they come out. This also means that you have closer kind of design opportunities with the, or co-design opportunities rather, with the Gemini APIs and the model building team. So that we can get set up immediately, and then also our Google Labs folks, who y'all might already know, at least a couple of them. I know that they're really wanting to see more collaborations with startups. So in the immediate term, trusted tester program, getting you access to the latest models, making sure that you have a clear path for all of your feedback to get back to the model building teams. We can set that up today. And then for
Awesome.
and then for the startup opportunity stuff, both in terms of kind of credits, as well as just like other partnership opportunities, we can set that up too. So it might be a little bit longer than just today.
Awesome.
To
No,
get
that
that
sounds
set
great. And
Now
if
things
anyone
have
on
to move
Google's side,
immediately.
up.
anyone on Google's side wants to open a PR too, I think that's Hannes's response to everything. It's like, open a PR, we love them. I'll get the AI to
Awesome.
review it for you and I'll ship it.
Cool.
But seriously, we have had, yeah, it would be great to work together more closely on this stuff. So thank you for that.
Cool. And for anybody else on the call that might have a startup, we have a Google for Startups program, which gives up to $350,000 in cloud
Ooh.
credits, equity free over 2 years. For AI companies. So if folks want to kind of join the Google for Startups program, that's another option. I know that like $350,000 of cloud credits that are applicable to like the Gemini APIs, but also things like Cloud Run, GCS storage, like random compute, like all of those things are possible.
Can you tell us a little bit about how that people can qualify for that? Is it just being an AI company technically, or what what
AI
what company gets 350 grand versus 50?
Yep. AI companies that are institutionally funded, and institutionally funded either means kind of like funded by an accelerator, a VC fund, or like somebody that is known as an accredited investor for kind of like the Google startup community.
Okay. Well, looks like we are coming to a close here. I lost your video feed on my computer in my recording about, I don't know, 8 minutes ago, but we still hear
Oh,
you.
Can I
When you
sneak one more
when you
question in
froze on
there?
us. Oh, one more question, and then we'll say our farewell.
In terms of the feedback, uh, is there any plans to bake a grounding mode into the thinking mode, the similar way that during the chain of thought, if it can also use grounding during that?
yeah. So tools use within thinking mode is certainly something that that I would not be surprised to see coming soon. But you
Yeah.
can couple tools use with thinking mode today. It's just not tools use within the thinking process. So it's kind of like you would have to set it up yourself to say like, all right, like build the plan to do the thing. And now for each phase of the plan, like you have the ability to call tools to help ground your to help ground each stage.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you very much from the Rue community and from us at Rue Code for joining us today and on such short notice. We really do appreciate it.
Absolutely, this was super fun, and thank you all for the great questions and for sharing feedback. This is excellent. I'm going to copy and paste all of the awesome nuggets from the chat log and send them back to our product teams.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you,
Have a
Paige.
good day.
Thank y'all. Bye.